I noticed him on the second morning. I hadn't gone in on the first. Check-in for room 14 had come through the diplomatic desk, paid by a Vorath consular account, the booking clerk told me, through the end of the month. And whoever had the room had hung the Do Not Disturb placard before I'd even started my cart. Fine. Some guests need the first day to settle. I left a fresh set of towels outside the door and went on with my floor. The second morning I knocked, called out housekeeping the standard way, waited the standard count, and let myself in. The room was empty, bed untouched. The complimentary tray of fruit and pressed crackers sat on the desk exactly where service had left it, minus 2 crackers. Both curtains were open to the Embassy Quarter Street below, letting in a wash of pale morning light. I was already checking the bathroom when I heard it, a sound like a cat settling deeper into upholstery, but heavier, slower. I came back out. The linen closet door, which I knew I hadn't touched, had a gap at the bottom, and from the gap came the faintest trace of warm air and a smell like heated copper. I knocked on the closet door. "Nothing," I said. "I'm going to change your towels and leave you some extra biscuits from my cart. I'm not going to make a fuss." Nothing again, but the warm air kept coming. I left 4 biscuits on the floor in front of the closet. The fruit, I moved to the nightstand where it might be easier to reach. I made the bed, replaced the towels, ran the standard checks, and let myself out. I thought about it for roughly 10 seconds in the corridor, and then put it down. Guests have their reasons. The room was paid. My job is the room, not the reasons. Third morning, the biscuits were gone. The fruit was gone. The closet door was shut again, but the copper smell was warmer, which I had come to understand meant the occupant was comfortable. I started bringing extra biscuits from the staff kitchen. I told Marin at the desk I was leaving a standing request for the kitchen to send up a small tray of soft items to room 14 each afternoon. Protein roll, a bowl of warm broth, soft bread, easy to eat. Marin asked if the guest had dietary requirements on file, and I said probably, and I'd sort it. She wrote it down. The kitchen sent it. I don't know what they charged the consular account for it. That wasn't my part. By the end of the first week I had worked out his schedule. He slept through the mornings and was awake by early afternoon. He didn't like the fruit after the first 2 days. I think it was too cold, but he ate everything warm. He never came fully out of the closet while I was there, but after the 4th day he stopped pulling the door shut when I knocked. I could see him by the end of the week, curled in the back corner on a folded duvet he'd pulled in himself. Small, ice-white scales that caught the afternoon light and turned it faintly blue, a tail tucked over his nose, amber eyes watching me from the dark like 2 lit coals. He was young. I'm not an expert in Vorath ages. I'm a housekeeper, not a naturalist. But young was obvious from the scale texture, still soft-looking, and from the size. He was about the length of my arm if I stretched it out. His wings were folded tight, and he hadn't opened them once in my presence. The way he tracked my movements was watchful but not afraid, more like a child being very careful not to be caught doing something they're not supposed to do. I talked to him while I worked, nothing important. The weather outside, what I was cleaning and why. The fact that the broth the kitchen sent was better on Tuesdays because the Tuesday cook used a different base. He listened. After a while he started making a sound when I came in. Low, just above the register I could feel more than hear, and I decided that meant he recognized me, which seemed reasonable. I did not report him to the desk. The room was paid. He was eating. He wasn't causing damage. Every morning when I let myself in, the closet door was still shut, and the room was otherwise undisturbed, and I thought, whoever left him here, they had a reason. My job is the floor, not the reasons. 11 days in, I arrived on my usual morning, and knocked, and heard something different. Not the low settling sound, but silence. A different kind. I let myself in. The closet door was open. He was not inside. He was standing in the middle of the room, upright, tail straight, wings half spread, and he was looking at the door. His scales had gone from ice white to something closer to pale silver, and his amber eyes had a quality I hadn't seen before. Not afraid, taut. I heard the elevator doors at the end of the corridor. I set down my cart. I went to the window and looked down at the embassy quarter street. 6 of them. Iron dark scales, deep charcoal with ember undertones, each one wearing ceremonial armor. Chest plates the color of cooling slag. Shoulder guards that swept back into long flanges. They moved in a column up the front steps. Each one was roughly twice my height. I looked back at the hatchling. He hadn't moved. His eyes went from the door to me and back to the door. I said, "Is that yours?" He made the low sound. I thought about it for a moment. Then I smoothed my apron, picked up my cart, and went to the door of room 14 and waited in the corridor. They came off the elevator in single file and stopped when they saw me. The lead one wore additional markings on its armor, rank indicators, I assumed, and its eyes were the color of molten iron. It was looking past me at the room. I said, "He's fine. He's been eating well. He doesn't like cold fruit, but he'll eat anything warm. He's in the room." The lead one looked at me for a long moment. Then it said, in accented but clear standard, "You know what he is." I said, "I know he's a guest." Another silence. Then it said, "How long?" I said, 11 days. Something passed through the armor column that I couldn't name. A change in posture, all of them at once. I stepped aside. I said, "He'll come out on his own. Don't crowd the closet." I don't know what I was expecting. The lead one moved past me into the room and stopped. The others stayed in the corridor. From where I stood, I could see the hatchling was still in the center of the room, still upright, still taut. The lead one lowered its great head and said something in Vorath that I didn't catch. The hatchling's wings folded. He made the low sound. Then, after a moment, he turned and walked to the doorway and stopped beside me and leaned his head, very lightly, against my hip. The lead one in the room was watching this. I put my hand on the hatchling's neck. I didn't think about it. His scales were warm. The elevator opened again. The one that stepped out was not wearing ceremonial armor. It was wearing something simpler, travel-worn, dark, the kind of thing that says I have been moving for days, and I do not care how I look. It was larger than the others, by a margin that made the corridor feel smaller. Its scales were deep iron, with traces of old ember along the jaw. It looked at the column of honor guard, and they moved aside without a word. It looked at the hatchling. The hatchling made a sound I hadn't heard before, higher, shorter, and then held still. The large one looked at me. It looked at my hand on the hatchling's neck. It looked at my apron, my cart, the key card clipped to my breast pocket. It looked at my face. It said nothing for a moment. Then it said my name, Beta Sorel, in the way you say a name when you already know it. Not reading it off a card, knowing it. The Vorath cadence on the syllables made it sound like something older than I was. Like it had been said somewhere before and was only now reaching me. I said, "He needs warmer food than the kitchen sends. If someone could brief whoever's taking over his care, I'd appreciate it." The large one held my gaze for another moment. Then it lowered its head, just slightly, the way a mountain shifts, and stepped back. The hatchling pressed once more against my hip. Then he walked to the large one and stopped, and the large one curled a foreleg around him. I went back to my cart. I had 3 more rooms on the floor, and the afternoon linen still to sort. I pushed the cart to the next door, knocked, called out housekeeping. Behind me, the corridor was very quiet. I did the rest of my floor the way I always do it. When I got to the elevator at the end, I looked back once. Room 14's door was closed. The Do Not Disturb placard was gone. I filed a standard vacancy notice with the desk, restocked the cart, and went down for my break. The kitchen had decent broth on that day. It was a Tuesday,